Thanks so much to Insight for including us here. We're really happy to be with you this afternoon. We prepared these reflections on housing ecologies to contribute to ongoing conversations on transborder living that Insight has organized as part of Timeless Ways of Building. We're really provoked by the critical readings of Christopher Alexander, his work in Mexicali and beyond, that this project has opened up, including timely questions about the social production of space and the intersection of social housing and public space. This aligns very closely with our own work in the San Diego-Tijuana border region, and we're really excited to share some of this work with you here this afternoon. So we begin with an image that many of you will recognize, the demolition of Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis. It marked the death of public housing in the United States, cementing in people's minds the equation that public housing equals ghetto, equals crime, and that modern architecture is dehumanizing. The campaign to demonize public housing was extremely effective, and by the mid-1980s, the responsibility for producing affordable housing had shifted decisively from the public to the private, entrusting the private sector and the market with the freedom to determine its product, to set the terms of affordability, all while elevating a postmodern pastiche, a kind of historical pastiche, as the new facade for social housing in the United States. But Pruitt-Igoe's decline demands critical re-examination. When Pruitt-Igoe was built, its housing units thrived. They were equipped with social and economic support systems sustained by progressive taxation and urban policy. When these supports were defunded, the unit's inhabitants were abandoned. The project imploded. Since then, the housing agenda has morphed from hyper-public to hyper-private, from housing to houses, from social systems to isolated units. And with it, the atomization of habitation in this country and a sure path toward unsustainable sprawl that's burning up our planet and social fragmentation. And what has come of this? Well, after decades of public retreat, thousands of public housing units have been demolished, millions of people have been foreclosed, millions more risked evictions during the pandemic, and houselessness has exploded everywhere. A new social economy of housing is more urgent now than ever. So we engage the housing crisis today with a critique of public withdrawal and trickle-down market logics. The market will never guarantee housing as a public good, or as Catherine Herbst said in the video, as a human right. The market will never guarantee community participation and inclusion, will never fight off gentrification. So we want to question here today housing financialization models monopolized by private interests. Obviously, private capital is essential. But within conventional affordable housing proformas and frameworks today, developers typically seek out superficial partnerships with community-based agencies, sort of box-ticking exercises to qualify for millions of dollars in tax credit subsidies. At the same time, housing authorities have been relegated to a managerial role, allocating housing vouchers to families who are now understood as customers. Only the public can demand public priorities. A new housing political economy is urgent that integrates design, funding, social services, and social protections, a model in which architects once again serve public priorities. While we are inspired by moments of agile public management and investment in US urban history, we don't want to fetishize top-down public interventions or suggest that government can or should go it alone. However, we refuse to capitulate to neoliberal and now Doge talking points that markets manage public goods better than public institutions do, that markets just need to be unshackled and unregulated. We believe the opposite is true. Tackling the housing crisis demands reconstructing creative, agile, efficient techniques of public management that are inclusive, transparent, and rigorously accountable to the public. The systematic destruction of government functions and social operations and protections that we're witnessing right now in the last weeks will launch an unprecedented and sobering period of austerity in the United States. Large-scale public housing will not return anytime soon. So the question is really burning for us. What can we do now? Are there other strategies of social housing that can penetrate the sort of, the logics of market-driven development that can incrementally, encroach into the hegemony of development as usual? Can community-based agencies, for example, become alternative developers of housing for their own neighborhoods? Can new alliances be forged between local governments and the grassroots to co-develop municipal parcels? Can philanthropic foundations become alternative below-market lenders? Can architects and communities collaborate to produce new economic models for small-scale urban development? And where can these new sites of experimentation begin? Where can we look to test and scale new approaches to social housing? These questions have long provoked our work in the San Diego-Tijuana border region, where neighborhoods on both sides of the wall have become sort of laboratories for social housing, where public space has become a seed for community development. So on the San Diego side, we engage older suburban zones where migrants have settled for generations and where sprawl, commodification, and gentrification fragment communities. Here, on the San Diego side of the border, we seek to informalize the formal, just enough to maximize social density, small-scale economic vitality, and climate resilience. In other words, injecting complexity into highly homogenized, increasingly unsustainable urban environments. On the Tijuana side, we engage informal settlements where bottom-up urban dynamics generate alternative uses and spatial mixing, but lack resources to stabilize, scale up, and perform to their full capacity. Here, we seek to formalize the informal, just enough to maximize local capacities. In other words, developing platforms to organize and stabilize urban heterogeneity. We decided long ago in our practice that tackling the housing crisis cannot wait for the client and the brief. We co-produced the brief with communities, understood not as clients, but as co-developers. And together, we summon the resources, the capacities that are needed to realize a project in the absence of formal public support. All of our projects that you'll see today leverage the capacity, the social networks, the financial leverage of our public university. In essence, we've conceptualized a new financial pro forma for community-owned housing, co-developed between a public university and a community.
So to carry out this work, we designed the UCSD community stations as a model of urban co-development between UC San Diego and grassroots organizations. We have created a network of public spaces on both sides of the wall and have built spaces of dignity and sanctuary in the city's periphery. For us, urban justice is a distributive concept. Think of the stations as a distributed university where we partner with low-income communities on long-term projects, collaborating on research, dialogue, cultural and educational activities, advocacy, migrant housing, public space, and environmental infrastructure. We are redistributing resources, but we are also redistributing knowledges. The community stations are the community engagement arm of our research-based design studio in the campus, creating a feedback loop between social-spatial research, public knowledge, and community engagement. Each community station is designed, funded, built, programmed, and maintained collaboratively between the campus and the community. Effectively, we have mobilized the economic and programmatic power of our public university as leverage for our community partners to develop their own housing, public spaces, and green infrastructure. We have built 4 stations in total, 2 in San Diego and 2 in Tijuana. Today, we will share 2 that focus on the intersection of social housing and public space, one on each side of the border wall. The UCSD Casa Community Station is a partnership with the nonprofit Casa Familiar, a 30-year-old community-based social service organization. Our Insight TAE fellows, in fact, will visit this site tomorrow. It is located in the border neighborhood of San Isidro, site of the busiest land crossing in the Western Hemisphere. We have written much over the years about our research here on the positive impact of immigrants in the transformation of American neighborhoods. Here, Tijuana's non-conforming mixed uses migrate north, and these pixels of difference transform the large, homogeneous swaths of exclusionary land uses of San Diego's sprawl into more sustainable and plural environments. And when Tijuana's confetti of non-conforming land uses hits the ground north of the border, it alters existing mono-use parcels across inner city neighborhoods, pixelating them with social, economic, and cultural complexity. San Diego's cookie-cutter subdivisions are retrofitted by immigrant communities like this mid-city post-war Levittown bungalow that was transformed into a Buddhist temple by a Vietnamese community. So who would imagine that the post-war American dream enshrined in the detached single-family suburban home would be adapted over time by the entrepreneurial energies of immigrants? These are urbanizations of adaptation, where bottom-up urban practices can inspire a new political economy to support alternative social densities, transitional uses, and shared economies found within immigrant neighborhoods. The UCSD Casa Community Station began with the adaptive reuse of a beloved historic church that sat for decades in disrepair and which we were able to rescue through this project. During construction, the building had to be lifted to install new foundations. During times of so much political violence inflicted on this border community, the levitating church inspired a sense of hope for local residents. With the renovation of this historic church or building in the heart of a small lot, we choreographed a neighborhood-based framework to hybridize public space and housing. A parcel-sized social infrastructure for cultural and economic activity is framed by affordable housing. Organizing the parcel through a variety of small-scale buildings performing different roles was also a deliberate strategy to coordinate diverse financial streams to fund the different building typologies, truly synergizing university, community, and foundation economic resources into a $9 million neighborhood development. We renovated the church into a community theater with an outdoor stage, flanked on one side by a series of small accessory buildings for social programming, and on the other side by an open-air civic pavilion. This social, educational, and cultural infrastructure anchors 10 units of affordable housing, a 6-plex and a 4-plex, at both ends of the parcel, all mediated by pedestrian walkways. We completed construction in 2020, and the church has become an epicenter of cultural life for the neighborhood, with its interior transformed into a small black box performance space that spills into the courtyard, and the social pavilions have been activated with migrant and community support programs. We are now fully engaged in cultural programming with our partners, and this is a unique approach about this model of co-development. We build the spaces and then we activate them with sustainable social and cultural programs funded by the university and co-curated with the community. Our programming focuses on cultural processes that expose injustice and increase neighborhood capacity. So imagine a small coalition of local artists, promotoras, and neighborhood youth collaborating with university curators, theater script writers, and visual artists who co-produce a play or a musical performance that explores an urgent issue facing the community and which is enacted by local residents in the community theater or civic pavilions. These cultural productions are rooted in neighborhood stories and become bottom-up evidence to increase public knowledge and transform urban policy. In other words, affordable housing truly takes on a different meaning when it is threaded into spaces for social programming, summoning residents to participate in the development of local economy and cultural productivity. Here, affordable housing is not just a number of cheap units, but an integrated social-spatial system that is programmed by university and community, synergizing spaces, programs, resources, and people. Moving across the border, our UCSD Alacran community station is in Tijuana, is located in the Laureles Canyon, an informal settlement adjacent to the border wall. As we zoom in further, we witness a collision between an estuary in the US, the border wall, and the precarious canyon, which is home to 100,000 people, where thousands of Mexican, Central American, and Haitian migrants have arrived in the last years, escaping poverty, violence, and agricultural instability caused by climate disruption. Laureles Canyon is a site of informal urbanization. As we have also written about over many years, the informal settlements of Tijuana are built with the urban waste from San Diego, recycling architectural parts to construct emergency housing and infrastructure. We have learned over the years a great deal from these incremental building practices as people construct their own housing in layers over time. In a case study we documented, a metal frame appeared from one day to another. In a couple of months, recycled materials began to thread the spaces, and in the next weeks, an informal house emerged. We have also noted that multinational factories surround these informal settlements and benefit from easy access to cheap labor. Over the years, we have experimented with factory-made material systems to structurally mediate the recycling of waste. We have proposed an ethical loop where factories invest in social housing. Here we are inside Ecologies, a Spanish multinational that produces lightweight metal shelving systems for global export, retrofitting its prefabricated materials into structural scaffolds for incremental housing. The UCSD Alacran Community Station is located in the most rugged, precarious, and polluted sub-basin of the Laureles Canyon. It is a partnership with Embajadores de Jesus, a religious organization led by activist pastor Gustavo Banda. With limited resources, he began a shelter inside the temple to provide protection, food, and basic services to hundreds of Haitian and Central American refugees while they navigated asylum processes in the US and Mexico. And with the help of skilled migrants, they began building their emergency housing. In 2019, we established a long-term partnership to co-develop a community station here to increase housing capacity. We accelerated production of Mecalux frames to install them on vernacular post and beam concrete systems into housing infrastructures. Together, we are now building Santuario Frontera. The housing scaffolds were built first, and the interiors are equipped with utilities to support incremental live-work configurations. These envelopes are being infilled right now by the migrants' residents themselves. Santuario Frontera began construction in 2022. The migrant community assembled the Mechalux shelving systems into housing frames. We also began healing the topography, creating hydrofiltration channels, gabions, terracing, and water collection systems, demonstrating that migrant housing can help restore local habitat and become the catalyst for building a more inclusive city from below. This is a translatable model of collaboration between a public university, a faith-based organization, and a multinational factory in Tijuana subsidizing the materials. With so much momentum, this has become the largest refugee shelter in the entire US-Mexico border region. The station seeded now the planning of a full-on sanctuary neighborhood with social services, a school, a hydroponic farm, economic incubators, and a health clinic. A food hall has just been completed with a civic plaza and a large industrial kitchen where our students are leading public health and food justice programs with the migrant community. Migrant shelters can help us rethink housing as a holistic and inclusive ecosystem where infrastructure is an agile and anticipatory social-spatial framework capable of negotiating both transition and rootedness, the ephemeral and the permanent.
So these two housing case studies are grounded in a set of building blocks, sort of social and ethical commitments that have long oriented our research-based practice. We'd like to end our talk with a few of these building blocks drawn from our new 2-volume publication with the MIT Press. So to begin, increasing urban equality or reducing urban inequality demands structural transformation in public and urban policy. We need new political language to complicate what we mean currently by density, zoning, and property. Well-worn cliches like equity, walkability, affordability, livability are meaningless without corresponding changes in urban policy and economy. Redefining affordability means amplifying opportunities for small-scale economic development and community participation as part of housing development. In other words, we need to reassign value to everyday skills and capabilities found in communities and create new roles for other civic actors in the development process. Relatedly, density should not be measured as an abstract number of units or objects per area. Density should be understood as the intensity of social and economic exchanges per area. Immigrant neighborhoods have taught us that the bottom-up urbanization we find in these neighborhoods is the DNA for democratizing the city more broadly. We challenge zoning that facilitates, accelerates, disinvestment, perpetuates inequality, and disconnects affordable housing from civic infrastructure and public space. Zoning must stop being punitive. Instead, it should be conceptualized as a generative resource that anticipates, stimulates, and organizes small-scale social and economic activity in neighborhoods. The developer's pro forma is architecture's financial plastic. Inside the mathematics of this spreadsheet, our services as architects amount to 15% of a project's construction costs. This undercapitalized asset, as Ted Smith has taught all of us, can be mobilized as collateral for development. Nothing should prevent us architects from becoming alternative developers of housing, and nothing should prevent communities from doing the same. We can bundle the sweat equity of architects, cultural producers, and community leaders, the economic equity of public universities, and municipal protocols for accessing public parcels to enable communities to develop their own neighborhoods. That's been our story in the work that we showed you today. In the end, the American dream of property ownership becomes irrational in conditions of structural inequality. We need to rethink conditions of property ownership and recuperate creative tools for community-based development in low-income neighborhoods, like United Housing Federations or community land trusts, to safeguard long-term affordability and prevent social displacements functioned by market fluctuation. And public space is an important part of this story. For us, public space is a public good that should be activated for civic dialogue and infused with resources to increase public knowledge and capacity for urban and political action. We reject conventional strategies of urban beautification that turn our public spaces into enclaves of consumption, right? That typically benefit the private developer more than anybody else. We see public space as a crucial site of urban pedagogy to learn collectively. And just like the Mexicali experiment, we also see public space as an armature for socializing affordable housing. Housing must be conceptualized beyond units. In conditions of poverty, housing needs to be embedded in an infrastructure of sustainable social, economic, and cultural support. We must rethink affordable housing from autonomous units into relational social systems. As the federal government accelerates fear in the communities where we work, we anticipate that the community stations will remain an alternative coalition of care and social protection. In the last days of his life, our dear friend, the late urbanist Mike Davis, who wrote a lot about this region and thought a lot about this region, reflected on the importance of love in a time of despair and bleak futures. So we want to give him the last word in a Guardian interview that he gave in 2022, soon before he died. He said, "It is our love for each other that keeps us going, and our refusal to bow our heads to accept the verdict." However powerful it seems, it's what ordinary people have to do, to love each other and defend each other.
Thank you.
Thank you.